The phone call came 3 days before Tommy's 8th birthday party. My sister Catherine's voice carried that familiar tone of polite condescension that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Hi Jessica, I wanted to talk to you about Tommy's party on Saturday." "What about it?" I asked, setting down the prototype I'd been working on in my home workshop. "Well, it's just that this year we're really trying to make it special. We've invited all the kids from his class plus their parents, and we want everything to be, well, impressive." "Okay. The thing is, I know you always like to bring gifts for Tommy and that's sweet, but this year I think it might be better if you just didn't." I stopped what I was doing. "You don't want me to bring a gift for my nephew's birthday?" "It's not that we don't appreciate the gesture," Catherine said quickly. "It's just that your gifts are always so basic. Remember last year? You gave him that wooden toy car when all the other kids were getting electronics and brand name items. The wooden toy car. I'd spent 3 weeks handcrafting it in my workshop, designing custom features and painting it with meticulous detail. Tommy had played with it for hours at the party, but apparently that hadn't impressed Catherine. Tommy seemed to like the car. Of course he did, he's a polite child. But Jessica, the other parents noticed these things. When Tommy opens presents, it reflects on our family. This year we're trying to maintain a certain standard. Catherine had married well, her husband Mark was a successful lawyer, and she'd become increasingly concerned with appearances over the past few years. What kind of standard? Well, for example, the Hendersons are giving Tommy the new gaming system that just came out. The Parkers got him the limited edition action figure set that costs $300. These are successful families, Jessica. They understand quality. What Catherine didn't understand was that I could easily afford to buy Tommy a dozen gaming systems or every limited edition toy on the market. But she'd never bothered to ask about my work or my finances, instead assuming that because I lived simply and worked from home, I must be struggling. "I see. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings," Catherine continued. "It's just that you work from home doing, what is it again? Crafts. Product design. Right, crafts. And I know that doesn't pay very well, so I don't want you to feel pressured to spend money you don't have on expensive gifts." Product design. I was actually the founder and CEO of Apex Innovations, a company that designed and manufactured high-end collectible items for major entertainment franchises. My crafts were prototypes for products that sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars to collectors worldwide. "Catherine, I can afford to buy Tommy a nice gift." "I'm sure you think you can, but honey, the gifts at this party are going to be really expensive. Like several $100s expensive. I don't want you to go into debt trying to keep up." "I won't go into debt. Look, why don't you just come to the party and enjoy yourself? Your presence is gift enough. Tommy will understand." After hanging up, I sat in my workshop surrounded by prototypes, custom designs and samples from my latest projects. On my desk was a contract for a new line of limited edition collectibles that would generate approximately $2 million in revenue over the next year. But my sister thought I made crafts for pocket change. I looked at the gift I'd been preparing for Tommy, a custom-designed action figure based on his favorite character from the Star Wars universe. It wasn't just any action figure. It was a one-of-a-kind prototype that I'd been developing for a new premium line. The figure was made from high-grade materials, featured dozens of articulation points, came with custom accessories that I'd designed specifically for Tommy's interests, and was housed in a custom display case with LED lighting. It was essentially priceless, the only one of its kind in existence. But Catherine would probably see it as another cheap craft project. I decided to bring it anyway. Saturday arrived with perfect weather for a backyard birthday party. Catherine and Mark's house in the suburbs was decorated with expensive-looking decorations, and the guest list was clearly composed of well-to-do families driving luxury cars. "Jessica." Catherine greeted me at the door, her smile a bit forced. "I'm so glad you could make it. You didn't bring a gift, did you? I thought we discussed this." "I brought something small," I said, holding up an elegantly wrapped box about the size of a shoebox. Catherine's face fell slightly. "Oh. Well, I suppose, just try to give it to him quietly, okay? Maybe after the other presents." The party was in full swing in the backyard, with about 20 children and their parents mingling around tables laden with catered food and an elaborate bounce house. I recognized the type of gathering, every detail carefully chosen to impress. "Jessica." Tommy ran up to me with the pure joy that only 8-year-olds can muster. Aunt Jess. You came. Of course I came, buddy. Happy birthday. Did you make me something cool in your workshop? I smiled. Tommy was the only family member who'd ever shown genuine interest in my work, often asking to see my latest projects when I visited. I might have made something special just for you. Awesome. Can I see it now? Tommy, Catherine intervened quickly. Aunt Jessica's gift is small, so we'll save it for last, okay? Let's start with the big presents. The gift opening ceremony was exactly what I'd expected. Tommy sat in the center of a circle while parents and children watched him unwrap increasingly expensive presents. The gaming system Catherine had mentioned, several $100 toy sets, high-end sporting equipment, designer clothes. Each gift was met with polite applause from the adults and excited squeals from the children. I could see Catherine beaming with pride as the pile of impressive gifts grew larger. This is amazing, Tommy said after opening what appeared to be a remote-controlled drone worth at least $500. Just wait until you see what we got you, Mark said proudly, gesturing to a large box that hadn't been opened yet. The final big gift was a top-of-the-line bicycle with all the accessories, easily worth over $1,000. Tommy was appropriately excited, and the adults murmured appreciatively about the quality and expense. Well, Catherine said, glancing at me nervously, I think that's all the presents. What about Aunt Jess's present? Tommy asked, looking around. Oh, that's just a small thing, sweetie. We can look at it later. But I want to see what Aunt Jess made for me. She always makes the coolest stuff. Several parents turned to look at me with polite interest. I could see Catherine's discomfort as she realized she couldn't avoid this moment any longer. It's really nothing special, Catherine said to the group apologetically. Jessica does crafts as a hobby. I'd love to see what you made, said one of the mothers kindly. Handmade gifts are so thoughtful. With resigned acceptance, Catherine gestured for me to bring forward my gift. I handed the box to Tommy, who immediately began tearing off the wrapping paper with enthusiasm. The first thing he revealed was the custom display case. A sleek, professional-looking black box with a clear front panel and subtle LED lighting around the edges. Whoa, said one of the kids. That looks expensive. Tommy carefully opened the case and I watched his face transform from curiosity to absolute amazement. Oh my God, he screamed at the top of his lungs. It's the limited edition Shadow Trooper. Every parent in the circle leaned forward to get a better look. But not just any Shadow Trooper, Tommy continued, his voice getting higher with excitement. This is the ultra-rare prototype version. He carefully lifted the figure from its case, and I could see the adults around the circle beginning to realize this wasn't a typical handmade gift. Look at the detail, Tommy announced to everyone. It has real metal armor pieces. And look, the weapons light up. And it talks. He pressed a button on the figure and it spoke several lines of dialogue in perfect voice quality. Tommy, said one of the fathers, leaning in closer, where did this come from? I've never seen one like this. My Aunt Jess made it in her workshop. She makes the coolest stuff. Made it? Asked one of the mothers, clearly confused. Like actually manufactured it? I could see Catherine's face growing pale as she realized this wasn't going according to her plan. Jessica, said Mark, Tommy's father, what exactly do you do for work? I design collectible items for entertainment franchises, I said simply. You mean like, professionally? Yes. One of the fathers, who I could tell was knowledgeable about collectibles, asked to examine the figure more closely. Tommy handed it over proudly. This is incredible craftsmanship, the man said, turning the figure over in his hands. The articulation, the materials, the paint application, this is professional-grade work. It's a prototype, I explained. I designed it specifically for Tommy based on his interests. A prototype? Asked one of the mothers. What does that mean exactly? It means there's only one in existence. I created it as a test model for a new product line. The adults were now all focused entirely on the action figure, passing it carefully around the circle and marveling at the details. What company do you work for? Asked another father. I own my own company. Apex Innovations. One of the mothers gasped. Apex Innovations? You mean the company that makes those incredible limited edition collectibles? Yes. Oh my God, she continued, pulling out her phone. My brother collects your figures. He paid $2,000 for the limited edition Vader you released last year. Catherine's mouth fell open. $2,000? For one action figure? Mark asked. Apex Innovations makes the most sought-after collectibles in the world, the mother explained, showing photos on her phone. They only produce small quantities and collectors pay enormous amounts for them. Another parent leaned forward. So when you say this is a prototype, I mean it's literally priceless, I said. It's the only one that will ever exist with these exact specifications. Tommy, who had been following the adult conversation with fascination, suddenly understood the magnitude of his gift. You mean this is worth more than all my other presents combined? Probably worth more than all the presents here combined, said the father who'd been examining the figure. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica, Catherine said weakly, I had no idea you were. I didn't realize that I was successful? I asked gently. Well, yes. Catherine, you never asked about my work. When I told you I design products, you assumed I was making crafts for craft fairs. When I said I worked from home, you assumed I was struggling financially. One of the mothers turned to Catherine. Your sister owns Apex Innovations and you didn't know. She never said. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject or made assumptions, I said, not unkindly. Tommy, meanwhile, was back to playing with his figure, completely absorbed in exploring all its features. This is the best present I've ever gotten, he announced to the group. Aunt Jess, how did you know exactly what I wanted? Because I pay attention when you talk about your interests, I said. I designed every detail based on things you've told me you liked. Can you make more of these? Asked one of the children. This one is special just for Tommy. But I am working on a line of similar figures that will be available next year. How much will they cost? Asked a parent. The standard versions will retail for around $400. Limited editions will be significantly more. Catherine looked like she was struggling to process this information. $400, she repeated. For the basic version. Tommy's is a one-of-a-kind prototype with features that won't be available in the commercial release. Mark cleared his throat. Jessica, I think we owe you an apology. For what? For assuming your gifts were less than generous. You assumed they were cheap because you judged them by price rather than by the thought and effort that went into them, I said. Tommy's wooden car last year took me 3 weeks to design and build. I researched his favorite colors, his favorite car types, even included features I thought he'd enjoy. And he loved it, Tommy piped up. I still play with it all the time. But we didn't appreciate the craftsmanship, Catherine said quietly. We just saw homemade and assumed it meant inferior. Handmade doesn't mean cheap, said one of the other parents. It means customized, personal, unique. Especially when it's made by someone with professional-level skills, added another. As the party continued, I found myself surrounded by parents asking about my work, my company, and the collectibles industry. Several mentioned that their children were huge fans of my products, and they'd had no idea the creator was Catherine's sister. So you're actually quite successful, Catherine said to me later as we cleaned up. Yes. And you could have bought Tommy any of the expensive presents the other families brought. I could have bought him everything on his wish list without thinking about it. But you chose to make him something personal instead. I chose to create something unique that showed I understand who he is and what he loves. Catherine was quiet for a moment. I feel terrible about telling you not to bring a gift. You should feel terrible about assuming my gifts weren't good enough without understanding what they actually were. You're right. I made judgments based on prejudices about handmade versus store-bought, expensive versus meaningful. Tommy ran up to us, still clutching his action figure. Aunt Jess, can I come visit your workshop sometime? I want to see how you make these. Of course, buddy. I'll show you the whole process. And maybe I can help design one? I'd love that. Catherine watched this exchange with a new understanding in her eyes. Jessica, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just because I found out you're successful, but because you put so much thought and care into making Tommy happy. That's what gift giving should be about, I said. Not impressing other parents but showing the person you care about them. Will you forgive me for being so awful about this? I'll forgive you. But I hope you'll remember this the next time you're tempted to judge something by its price tag rather than its value. I will. And Jessica? Yes. Next year I want you to bring whatever gift you think Tommy would love, regardless of what it costs or where it comes from. Deal. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the day's events. My family had learned valuable lessons about assumptions, about the difference between price and value, about the importance of understanding someone's situation before judging it. But more importantly, Tommy had learned that the best gifts come from people who pay attention to who you are and what matters to you. The next week, Catherine called me with an unusual request. Jessica, I was wondering, would you be willing to design something custom for Mark's birthday? I want to give him something that shows I really thought about what he'd love. What does he love? Classic cars. Specifically, 1967 Mustangs. I can work with that. 3 months later, I presented Mark with a custom-designed scale model of a 1967 Mustang, complete with a working engine, functional lights, and details based on his specific preferences that Catherine had observed and noted over the years. He cried when he opened it. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me," he said. "How did you know to include all these specific details?" Because Catherine paid attention to what you love and shared those details with me. The custom model, while not as expensive as a luxury watch or high-end electronics, meant more to Mark than any store-bought gift ever could. A year later, my nephew's 9th birthday party was completely different. The focus was on creativity, personalization, and thoughtfulness rather than price tags and brand names. Several parents had asked me to help them design custom gifts for their own children. Tommy's gift that year was a custom action figure of himself as a superhero, complete with powers and accessories based on his personality and interests. He declared it even better than the prototype from the previous year. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from children who understand that the best gifts aren't the most expensive ones, they're the ones that show someone really sees you and cares enough to create something just for you. And sometimes it takes a room full of adults realizing they've misjudged handmade creativity to understand that true value can't be measured in dollars. It can only be measured in love, thought, and the joy it brings to someone who matters to you.